So I spent nearly 20 years working in finance. I sat on the boards of everyone from HSBC's alternative businesses through to working for Schroders, Deutsche Bank. And then I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Prognosis of roughly 12 months. Over 18 months later, I currently have no visible signs of disease. And I realized that I needed to go back to working and actually earning some money at some point. Sat in a chemo chair in last summer, 2025. I came across a health and fitness business. It's an e-commerce store selling a lot of the modalities, a lot of the therapies that I used as part of my treatment. And it was for sale.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Want to attract and convert more leads? Want to learn how digital PR, branding, and SEO can establish and build your brand identity? Welcome to the Market Movers Building Brands and Links with Linkify podcast. We answer these questions and help you ramp up your brand visibility and credibility. Let's cut through the noise and make your business the talk of the town. We're your hosts, Nick and Chris. Let's get this show on the road.
Welcome to the Market Movers podcast. Today we are joined by Dale Atkinson, owner of Peak Health and Fitness and former governance and risk leader turned health-focused e-commerce operator. Today we're digging into why conversion beats traffic in high-ticket wellness and how trust, evidence, and patient-first thinking drives real growth. Welcome to the show, Dale.
Hi, guys. Thank you very much for having me.
Dale, it's great to have you on. To get started, why don't you give us a bit of background information and how you got started in the space?
Yeah, so let's try and do this as quickly as we can, sort of thing. So I spent nearly 20 years working in finance. I sat on the boards of everyone from HSBC's alternative businesses through to working for Schroders, Deutsche Bank, all the big names at various points at a really senior level. Roll on 2024, and I'd started my own consultancy. I was working with a government down in Africa, investigating a president and all this kind of stuff. You know, all the really fun stuff that makes life great. And life was going amazingly. And then summer of 2024, my partner had a funny turn. They thought she'd had a heart attack, dragged her into hospital. They ended up finding a small cell lung cancer. So October 2024, they removed the whole upper part of her right lung. So did a full lobectomy. And then 12 days later, on our youngest little boy's first birthday, I was then diagnosed with terminal cancer. Sadly, I was given inoperable, incurable. They thought at that point in time I only had a prognosis of roughly 12 months. I think they gave me 11 and a half to be exact. So I then went on and researched very, very heavily. And as I sit here now, sort of over 18 months later, I currently have no visible signs of disease.
Oh, wow.
So my nearly 10 centimeter tumor has vanished, metastases, lymph nodes, all back to normal. And I realized that I needed to go back to working and actually earning some money at some point. You know, we can't all sit and just do cancer treatment all the time and look after ourselves. Sadly, the world runs on money and my mortgage needs paying. So sat in a chemo chair in last summer, 2025. I came across a health and fitness business. It's an e-commerce store selling a lot of the modalities, a lot of the therapies that I used as part of my treatment. So ice baths, red light panels. It also sold, saunas and bits and pieces like that. And it was for sale. And it was a former semi-professional cyclist called Matt Connor who owned it at the time, had founded it back just after COVID. And essentially he had a full-time job and a few other projects and wasn't giving it the time and energy it needed. So I went, okay, great. Saves me starting from scratch. Let's take on this e-commerce store. Roll on December 2025, which is when the actual sale eventually went through and we completed. Sadly, we found a number of issues in the business which hadn't been presented during the due diligence, including hidden debt and a bunch of other things, which has been great fun to solve, as these things always are. I've managed to remove the previous owner from the business completely and all these kind of things as part of this process. So it's sort of worked out quite well for me, but it's a shame it came to him trying to commit fraud on me in order to end up where I needed to be eventually. Yeah. But having had a career as a compliance officer, funnily enough, I know how to deal with people committing fraud and I know what to look out for. So it was all fine. It was all covered. And then roll on to now. So we have also recently started a patient trust audit and patient trust signal consultancy. That's due to launch in the next couple of days. We've beta tested. We are putting the product out there at the moment. And essentially that is also helping to look at other e-commerce stores, helping to look at healthcare and health tech firms, especially those selling online, and to help them to understand things better from the patient's perspective. Now, that could be everything from the focus of their social media posting to whether they're fronting reviews or qualifications and credentials on their website, through to making sure that they are releasing the right sort of content on blogs, etc., in order to pinpoint the SEO and the GEO metrics that people are now looking for. And we've accumulated over 20 sets of signals, so 20 different focuses as the basis for this audit. A lot of it's also done manually with things like mystery patient and all that kind of stuff. And we are now sort of bringing that together to try and help other firms to increase their conversion rates as well.
Dale,
So, whistle stop.
absolutely amazing. Like, I'm so happy to hear about your recovery. I obviously want to dive into everything business. I do have a couple of questions on the story, just because
Yeah, of course.
it's fascinating. Did you say your wife and you within the space of 12 months both? Is that just a crazy, unfortunate coincidence? Yeah,
It seems so. I
Yeah.
mean, we've come across a lot of things on our journey that sort of say that it may have been environmental, it may have been lots of different things that could have been the absolute sort of sparking cause for it. But yeah, it was, coincidence.
That's
She had
nuts.
small cell lung cancer, mine was esophageal, two very different cancers, two very different focuses, and two very different treatments as well.
And you're in full remission now, and your wife as well.
So I will never be classed as full remission because the NHS put me as incurable and inoperable.
Right.
What they will, however, grant me is after I have a PET scan later this year, we are hoping I will get what's called NED, so no evidence of disease,
Wow.
which means that there is no physical tumour, there is no metabolic activity, there is essentially, for all terms and purposes, nothing left in me. And if it was any other diagnosis, they would class it as full remission. It's just because they called it incurable, they now can't go back on their word.
Okay. And final question: Did you do anything to get to this point, or was it just?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
a whole podcast in and of itself.
Okay.
How long have we got? So I researched heavily. I used everything from metabolic approaches through to lots of other adjunct therapies. I had off-label medications. I use an infrared sauna, an ice barrel, red light panel, pulsed EMF. I have a lovely device from a company called Omni PMF here, which is, it helps to basically reset some of the frequencies and some of the electromagnetism that your body runs off of in order to then lower stress levels. And we found that my cancer was heavily run off of cortisol, etc. Also, part of the reason that I can't go back to my former career is because my tumor was heavily, heavily fed by adrenaline and fed by cortisol. So I can't go back into the 14, 16-hour days, the high stress, the off to catch criminals and do good in the world, but that makes your heart race. And I can't do it anymore. My body won't let me. And it's just a recipe for disaster for me, unfortunately. So also hence the refocusing in life.
Yeah. Amazing, Dale. Absolutely amazing. Sorry, and thank you so much for sharing.
Of course.
Okay, let's dive in then. So you've purchased this website. You've unearthed, unfortunately, the non-disclosed parts that slipped through the due diligence. I think actually as well, by the looks of it, you found a business which was really in line with what you've recently been going through, selling a lot of the products that you've recently used.
Yeah.
One of the things that we discussed before the podcast was how important conversions are when it comes to things like high ticket e-commerce. So can you talk us through how you have looked at that, implemented that, and strategy around that?
Yeah, of course. So when I initially took on Peak Health and Fitness, it had somewhere around 1,600 SKUs, so 1,600 products listed on the site.
deal.
It had, 20 different types of barrel sauna. It was a catalogue. It was a huge, brute, all over the place catalogue of items that he had picked up along it, that the previous owner had picked up along his way and just thought, well, I'll chuck that in there. Oh, I'll stick that on there. It's fine. It had, high strength gym equipment. It had vibration plates mixed in with exercise bands, mixed in with red light panels and therapy stuff. It was just all over the place. So the first thing we did was a full rationalization. We took that 1,600 products roughly, cut it down to less than 10%. I think as we stand today, we're at 103 products in total across the site.
Wow.
And a lot of that is just variations of products. So where we have a range of blow-up saunas from a great company called Wave Spas. We have obviously 8 different colors, so they count as SKUs on our site. So we now have 103 products, including the variations. So in actuality, we have a site that's somewhere around 20 to 30 products in total being fronted to customers, which means, first of all, it's reducing decision fatigue. And I find a lot of websites out there at the moment are trying to do too many things. They don't know their audience well enough, and they're not focusing well enough on that sort of audience, on what they really want and how to sell to them, because they're too busy going, trying to provide every single thing. They're trying to be Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat, providing every single color to every single person. And in actuality, they need to really hyper focus on, this is my core product. This is my core audience. This is what they need and how to speak to them. So we then took that rationalization. I brought in a CRO specialist, a client revenue optimization specialist, and we have so far stabilized the site. We've then begun to weave my story into it in order to give trust signals and trust markers to show, first of all, this isn't just another catalog. We are trying to just provide products that I have used, that I myself stand by, that we know have the science behind them and have the quality as well. We have cut out suppliers who don't meet our very strict criteria. And I mean, at the moment, we don't even have an ice bath up on there. And that was one of the cores of the whole platform, was ice baths. But we don't have an ice bath supplier because the ones we were using didn't meet our strict quality criteria. They didn't meet the measure of having the right customer service for cancer patients specifically, because I have a lot of cancer patients that follow me and come to my website. And I wouldn't be able to stand by it when somebody rang me up and said, look, Dale, I've installed it and it stopped working 3 days later. Mm-hmm. And these companies weren't providing the service that was needed in order to give me the surety that I could sell their products. So we've cut all of that out. We've cut down right the way to as bare bones as we can. And now we are rebuilding based on what people really need and want. We are fronting specifications. We are fronting everything that we can to be transparent. We are making sure that people truly understand what is the right ice bath for them as well. So it's all good and well going on and somebody trying to sell you a £20,000, does everything, all singing and dancing transformer for your garden. But in reality, most of us don't need that. We just need a really high quality, really well-made product that just continues to work and is reliable, that we can leave outside, that gets a bit wet and it's fine, that we know if something goes truly wrong with, the company is going to stand by as well. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what we're trying to use in order to increase conversion, is providing the right things to the right people at the right quality with the right information. And so far, it seems to be working really well for us. We have upped conversion from, when I took over the site, it was 0.0018, so abysmal. We have lowered traffic somehow. I've gotten rid of a lot of the ads and all sorts of things that were being pumped out generically. And we are hyper-focusing on exactly who buys our things and who needs them. And we are in the process, on top of this, of also doing up some new landing pages, etc., with focuses in terms of treatment styles, in terms of where people are for things like chemotherapy, etc. And we are trying to basically provide as much help and as much knowledge as we humanly can to help people make better decisions, not just more expensive ones. And that's another thing lots of businesses at this point seem to miss. They are trying to drive lots of value, but they're not trying to really make sure the product is the right one for the client.
That is a huge decision. You purchase a new business and you just drastically cut. I'm picturing, first of all, like, do you remember the old catalogs and you get on an airline and it's just like pages and pages of random stuff? I can't remember what those are called, but I'm picturing, I'm picturing that was your business to start. So your background was compliance. How certain were you that this was the right call? Because when you tell your story, it feels very obvious, like cut it down to a core theme, focus on your ideal customer. But I imagine purchasing your first business in this space and deciding, I'm going to just slash the inventory and we're going to get down to like just the minimal things like that. That's a really big decision.
Yes, it was not the easiest decision, especially because the business was there. It was making money. It was making okay money when I took it on as well. Admittedly, it had hidden debt, but that's a whole other matter. But it was in a decent enough position that I could have just taken it on and run it as it was and not done anything at all and not spent any time. But what I quickly realized, and what I hope comes across in all of the stuff I put out on any platform, is that I am a huge focuser on quality. My compliance background and my skill set specifically has honed me into being a bit of a perfectionist. You can't go off and investigate and find anomalous transactions in millions of lines of code in a banking system without being a little bit anal. So I ended up bringing that mindset to this. And it was, I don't just want another generic site. I'm not just going to be an e-commerce seller. I want to instead go and grow partnerships with my suppliers and grow partnerships with my customers. I want, instead of people who come and buy once at a £5,000 thing, I want them to come back. They don't just want their ice bath. They also want their hot tub. They also want their sauna. They also want their red light panel. And they come back because we provide the right customer service, we provide the right information, we help people make proper informed decisions, not just expensive decisions. And we actually are going to provide that human touch point. It's directly my phone number going through to my business WhatsApp on the website. It's not a generic service. It's not an AI. It's not a VA company. It is me. And if you message that number, I will sit down and I will spend the next half an hour looking through all of my specs, looking through everything that I have. I've actually built an AI glossary essentially to help me to front this information quicker out of Claude. And it's me sitting there doing that. And then it's me writing the message back personally to every single one of the requests that we get through. And it will be until that is, no longer possible under whether we scale that far or not. But that's what we're doing with the site. That's where my skill set comes in, is that really being able to pick through things, really being able to understand the bigger picture and how the nitty gritty and those minutiae of details really go to affect both us as a business and they go to affect the customer and their buying opinion, their buying decision.
Yeah, I love that because I think that you really can't state how big of a decision that is to pivot like that. And you gave the site identity. You came in and you said this is what it stands for. This is what it does. This is who it's for. And I think that's often missing from e-commerce brands. Obviously, the great ones, they have that nailed down. This is who we are. This is our brand. But I think that's just incredible that you're the first purchase you make in this space and you're able to nail that down. I think that's really cool. How much of your personal story is weaved into the business, into the narrative?
This was going to be my exact question. Let me just let me tack something onto the end of that.
Okay.
Because I think the personal story weaved into the business, as Nick has asked, how much of that I think is incredible when it comes to things like trust signals and conversion in of itself. My question is, was there an element of you when deciding how much of your story to put in? It seems like it and I would never in a million years suggest that you would do this, but it seems like you were in a position where you could sort of flirt with the idea of saying, I've used these products and they sort of cured my cancer. That would be
yes.
a very disingenuous. How did you find the line to tread between that? Because actually that, you have used these products and it did help you. So that's my question.
It's not so, I mean, that is legitimately if this worked for you, you want other people to also get the same access, that's.
Yeah. I heavily toyed with the idea, or I have various points for various different projects. I have a blog and I put out a lot of information on socials and all this sort of stuff. I've toyed with the idea of saying things along those lines many times. But, and this is something I'm actually going to be presenting at the Healthcare Industry Management Systems and I can never remember what the last S stands for. Big conference in Copenhagen next month with lots and lots of policymakers and doctors. I'm going to be making exactly this sort of a point there. And it's that it's based on basically a study of one. What I did isn't necessarily going to work for everyone else. And a big part of my journey was doing things like next generation sequencing and really understanding the archetypes and the pathways at play with my specific cancer. So I was able to use that information, use that knowledge in order to find the evidence that worked for me. If I then front that and say that this will work for other people, well, that's not fair on them. It's not fair on me and the effort that I put into getting where I am. And it's just patently not true. And there are so many brands out there making crazy statements like that part of our differentiation as well is we're not willing to do that. I'm not sacrificing my integrity. I'm not sacrificing what I have been through just to get a few more sales. It's really not worth it to me. We had a decent enough insurance payout at the beginning of this that we don't really have to worry anymore. This isn't kind of I'm doing it to desperately make money. This is me doing this to try and actually help people. And I would point out with that, so far we've already provided somewhere like 30, I think it's 31 saunas now at massively reduced rates and quite often at loss to try and provide them to people in cancer situations like mine where we do think it can help. And we've done that at cost or at a loss in quite a few instances now just to do that. That and using my story in the wrong way would completely destroy everything we're doing on that side. It would completely destroy every piece of faith and love we're building as a business and the help that we are able to give people if we erode that away with mistruths. So yes, of course, it's always a consideration. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. But at the same time, it was a fleeting consideration because in reality, the brand itself is me and I am the brand. And if I don't have my integrity, then what else do I have?
I think
Yeah,
the key part of that was that when you said that like it worked for you because your specific type of cancer,
The
like,
markers.
that's the important part there. It wouldn't actually work for everybody else because there's definitely like if this worked for me and it can work for other people, you want to share that because you want them to have that same opportunity.
Well, it's one of the big problems in the cancer circles is there are so many people on Facebook groups spouting off anecdotal information that isn't based in any form of science. It's not based on any trial or evidence or anything out there. And unfortunately, this space as well, the adjunct therapy space that I'm now operating in, with the ice baths, the saunas, the red light panels, etc., PEMF, as I pointed out the headband a minute ago, there are so many people doing that in that space as well that we are desperately trying to cut through that. And one of our biggest sort of USPs, as it were, unique selling points, is the fact that I sit and read the science. I have these products myself. I'm literally buying the products that we are selling. Omni PMF is going to be hopefully coming up on our site very soon after I've finished testing it. I've had it for a month or so, and I will have it for another month before we then confirm whether we believe it works. It's also backed by science, backed by trials. They're one of the only brands with real evidence to them. And that's what we're after. And that's what we're trying to do, is to essentially cut that need to do all that research out yourself and provide somewhere that fronts that information directly to clients, even if it signals away from our website, which it quite often does with things we post, because we want you to know that we're doing this in your best interest. We're not doing this for profit.
Super interesting. Okay, now let's take this to the next level then, because you also have a consultancy firm which you'll be launching soon, and you've talked about additional trust signals that are often lacking or missing from websites operating within the health space. We actually see this a lot. We work a lot with health businesses, clinics, rehabilitation clinics, like good businesses. They come to us for digital PR, for SEO or authority building PR. So they're making good choices in the sense that they believe that they need to be like more demonstrably visible and associated with trusted media. But then we'll sort of like have a cursory look at the website before working with them and say, like, you haven't got an about page or like you've got like one doctor on the about page with like a picture and just their name, like no outbound social icons, no credentials. So talk us through trust signals, how you can implement them into your business, the ones that you are, the ones that work, and then like what you see lacking as part of the consultancy work, and quick wins, and where the future of building this trust goes, especially in the era of like LLM search and chatbot search as well.
Well, I think the first thing to say is we looked at this space by accident. So as part of the work we were doing on the website for Peak Health and Fitness, I worked heavily with our CRO, who is still ongoing on the site and doing a lot more, but it was a lot of things I sort of clicked and went, actually, that makes a lot of sense across multiple industries. Why are we just looking at this for e-commerce? And when I went out to see if there were any other companies basically looking at things from a patient perspective and ensuring not just that the mystery patient journey, a bit like mystery shopper, they do mystery patient, or that the management consultancy level of full restructuring and all this kind of stuff, there was nothing sat in the middle. There was one or the other at two absolute extremes of the offer. One is multiple tens of thousands of pounds for a Deloitte or whatever to come in and tell you what to do. And the other one is paying a few patients £50 each to come and test your service and give you a little bit of feedback. There is no framework to it. There's no real quantification of what it means or how it means, or inclusion of other points other than just the mystery patient service. So we realized that this doesn't exist. And I have spent the last nearly 6 months now building a really comprehensive audit platform. And I mean, just for clarification, not long before my diagnosis, I was off helping to build a brand new audit platform for one of the world's biggest banks. And I was the program manager for it. So I ran the entire project and setup. I can do an audit. My background in compliance is all basically around audit and the output of audits. So I took all of that knowledge and skill set and went, okay, what really is missing? And we have come up with in total 29 factors that we can assess. We will do on a standard, because most companies don't need all 29. On a standard audit, we will do roughly 20. Now, that includes everything from the copy used on their website through to whether they actually have things like, if we're talking about a clinic, you were saying about doctors a minute ago, whether they've set up a Doctify profile. You can go on and rate doctors much in the same way you can rate your Uber or all this kind of stuff. There is a platform called Doctify. If a clinic isn't on Doctify, a lot of patients will go, obviously not legitimate, back away. All these little bits and pieces, including whether they have a good social media presence, because with the rise of GEO and the use of LLMs, as you well pointed out, LLMs quite often, and ChatGPT is notorious for this, pull directly from LinkedIn as a source of information and a source to front people from and recommend people from. So if you're not on LinkedIn, if you don't have a decent banner, if your headline doesn't outline exactly who you are, then you're missing a trick. If you then don't have the reviews and if you're not fronting testimonials onto a website, you're missing a trick. If you don't have your, let's say for a doctor, a GMC number, which is your medical license number, fronted on your site so people can find you and check that you are properly regulated, you're missing a trick because patients look for these things. Patients don't want just a generic service, much like the e-commerce stores that you see out there. There are so many copycat, faceless, nameless e-commerce stores that, unfortunately, the idea of that sort of an approach seems to have perpetrated or perpetuated into wider society. And doctors are using the same sort of thing. They're building websites using Base 44, doing all these sorts of things which are just, they don't fit and they don't suit and they're not helping them. But they don't have the knowledge and understanding to know what will. So we're coming along, and majority of these, by the way, are already successful businesses that we're dealing with. We've beta tested and run this quite a number of times now, and it seems to add a huge amount of value. We came across, I'll give you one of the examples, we came across an integrative oncology clinic who was, at that point in time, they were having a revenue of somewhere around 2 million a year. But their website was very basic. It was green and had a leaf on the front. It didn't front any credentials or qualifications. They didn't have any social media presence. They didn't have a Doctify profile. They didn't have Trustpilot. They didn't have a million and one things. They didn't have any media. They didn't have any mainstream PR done at all. And all these sorts of things patients will actively look for and look at as part of their journey. And specifically for an integrative oncology clinic, if you put up a big green leaf, people are going to think you do cannabis, not integrative oncology, which is quite often repurposed medications, the metformins, the aspirins, all this kind of stuff. They're two very different focuses. So sticking up a big green leaf doesn't help you. So we went back to them and we have so far 3 months later, and we're trying to build a case study around this, FYI, 3 months later, we have increased their revenue by nearly 40%. By fixing a number of very small things, by getting the GMC number fronted on the front page, by having the lead doctor's credentials there. They also had 2 web pages which said coming soon, which doesn't add any gravitas to their website. We've done all of these little bits and pieces for them. And in total, I think I charged them, because it was one of our beta tests, we charged them about $7,000 a month for the retainer for me to sit and oversee and tell them what to do and provide them copy and all this kind of stuff, plus $5,000 for an audit. They are already making something like $600,000 to $800,000 more if their year continues, like the last 3 months have done. So, the value's there.
Sounds like a good case study.
There. It's just going to come down to whether I can find enough businesses to pay to do it properly.
That's a big part of our first step when we bring on a new client. The things you were talking about, those are literally the same things journalists look at when they're deciding if they're going to quote an expert. Like, is it clear that you're actually this person, that you have the right credentials? And if you don't have that on your website, if you don't have that on your LinkedIn, we'll bring on clients, they won't even have a LinkedIn. We're like, how are you a medical doctor and you don't have a LinkedIn? That's just crazy.
And that's part of our outreach piece as well. I've had on this journey 3 or 4 people go, well, I kept putting out pitches on Quoted and on Harrow, etc., but nobody picks me up. I don't know why I can't get any press. And you have absolutely no online standing at all. Your website rating is in the dump. Why would they? In any way, shape or form, why would they want to come to you?
All right. So with this audit, a couple of things you mentioned, I think were like, it's surprising that people don't think about that. It's obviously things you need. Was there anything that when you were doing the research, anything that you were like, wow, I never would have thought, like, what was the most surprising thing that came out of that?
That's a really good question. And I'm not sure I can think of one right off the top of my head, because there were so many.
Okay.
Like, honestly, there were so many. And there were so many silly little things as well. Like I hadn't ever stopped, and this is one of my designers had come up with. I had never stopped to realize that there is a difference in colorings and people's identification of trust. Or that simply you can reword a 5-word question on a website and it completely hits differently in the brain. I hadn't realized just the level that psychology informs everything we do and how it can actually really increase conversion if you use it properly. At the same time, if you come at something from the wrong lens, which is unfortunately a big thing within especially the healthcare space, that they come from the practitioner asking, not fully understanding what it means to the patient, then you can put people off hugely. And, very simple tweaks that we've seen, very simple ones in terms of using slightly different wording or having a pop-up box next to the question, just clarifying it, even if it's an idiot's guide level, just clarifying what you mean and what you want included, because to you it might mean this, to them it might mean something else. Like the very simple question, if a GP asks you, and what else are you doing alongside cancer care? For me, that's a massive long 30-page answer kind of thing. For them, they're just expecting, I'm doing some adjunct therapies. You need to qualify and you need to really sort of quantify these things in order to be able to help people understand them better. So I think for me, it was that level of what psychology really does in this that probably made the biggest difference.
Yeah, I think another interesting point is that businesses like that will often forget and overlook is the common sense things that you can understand as a consumer. For example, a lot of businesses will get bad reviews. It's an inevitable part of business. And as a consumer, if you go to look at a Doctify or a Trustpilot and you see some bad reviews and they are unanswered, that in of itself is a huge distrust signal. We had a lawyer on the podcast a few episodes ago, and they'd been sort of negatively attacked with some bad reviews to their Google business profile. They were able to hire an agency that was able to remove about 80% of these fake bad reviews, and their caseload went up by like 30% in the space of a few months. So even just a small strategy with like removal of bad reviews if they're fake, or answering them to show that you care, can be like hugely impactful, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. And that's actually one of the signals we use as well. So in total, we have something like 380 data points that are behind this. And one of those is looking at quantifying things like Trustpilot and Doctify reviews, etc., making sure they are all answered, and also assessing the validity and the approach of that answer. Because if it's a guarded, don't attack me, I'm the doctor, I'm the expert, that's a very different answer to a, look, I completely understand. I'm so sorry that was your experience. We tried to do what we could, but unfortunately it just wasn't working, is a very different approach and a very different thing for any consumer, patient or otherwise, to see. So yeah, we quantify and look at exactly the same things, Chris, because it's so important.
Now, a lot of this has been about trust. E-commerce space, I think the big thing with trust is having like testimonials on the site, right? People showing, I tried this product, it worked, blah, blah, blah. What do you do in the medical space? Should you also have testimonials on the page?
So there can be a slightly difficult one because of the the patient doctor confidentiality, etc. But as I see it, there is absolutely nothing there to stop you asking patients for testimonials. If you set up in exactly the same way an e-commerce business would, and you go out and actively ask them, as part of that they sign a consent that what they are providing is able to be released, then there isn't really a problem there. And even more so in the medical space, you will find patients actively want to, because they want other people to know they had a good experience, because the medical space is filled with so many horror stories left, right and center that people are desperate to highlight where is good. And I found myself doing it in multiple posts on LinkedIn and all these kind of things, is highlighting doctors specifically because they were good. And, people want those things. People want to do that. So absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of people are posting that on their social accounts anyway. So you might be able to just find who's already talking about it and see if you can use that on your site. Because that does
there's
get
a bit
into
of a bit of a grey area in terms of pulling somebody else's review on a site, but going out and asking
with asking permission, of course. Yeah. But if you know they're already talking about it, yes, right. But there's a lot more compliance in medical. But if you already know that they're actively talking about it in public, then they're more likely to allow you to put the review on your site.
Absolutely. And they're more likely to have some reach as well. And it's more likely to make an impact to you as a business. So by all means, just go and ask. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. And it can make a huge difference. Dale, this has been fascinating. As we approach the end of the show, I think we should touch on AI. the way that people research for products and services is changing in front of our very eyes at the speed of light. No longer is it like trying to find the keywords that make sense in Google, but you can just have like a full-blown conversation with ChatGPT. Best doctor to help me achieve X, Y, and Z. I've been diagnosed with this, that, and that, blah, 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 blah. Are there any strategies or anything that was unearthed from your like audit discovery process that you think is most impactful when it comes to being recommended and trusted inside of these large language models search tools?
Well, firstly, I'd say for me, using a service like yourselves is exactly where you come into this, because it's such a changing space and there are so many things to keep an eye on that is impossibly hard for, say, even me as a sort of entrepreneur sort of thing. It's impossibly hard to keep up to date on exactly where everything's going, exactly what you need to cover, exactly how things need to be written, and to just do it as well. It's so much information and it is so difficult to do. So delegate is probably my best bit of advice there. However, on the business note, in terms of the consultancy, I would say the one big thing we're finding is that posting on LinkedIn above all other things gets you featured much higher on ChatGPT. If you can state yourself as a proper authority on LinkedIn, LinkedIn is seen as being highly trusted by ChatGPT. It is currently the most cited website on ChatGPT for things. And there are a lot of businesses that are missing a trick by not posting on there. Even if you don't think it's a relevant platform for you, just, get a media scheduler and copy it across from Facebook and whack it on there, because then you have more likelihood of being starred on ChatGPT and found and cited for things. It puts you as more authority generally overall, and therefore your website ranking goes up and your GEO style, GPT ranking goes up. So you're more found more times.
Yeah, that's great. I think there's quite a few things from your audit you mentioned that are going to have an impact. They're all the authority building things, and that's going to have an impact on your SEO and AEO. So yeah, that's perfect.
Hugely so. And then we've also built multiple layers behind it from the patient lens and all sorts, which is where it's sort of a slightly different service. We're not looking at the same sort of realms as you guys. We are looking at it for how it can impact patients and how it can make patients' journeys better, as opposed to just how it can increase conversion and general views, etc.
Dale, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for opening up and sharing your story with us. And then also everything that you're doing with the business and then the consultancy, I think is really important. And I think it's going to positively affect all of the companies that you work with. If people want to find you, track you down, if they want to buy any of the products from your website or get in touch with you with regards to the consultancy, share some links, tell us where they can go.
Yeah, absolutely. So the health and fitness site is peakhealthandfitness.co.uk. We sell everything from ice baths to saunas to all sorts, with lots of new products coming soon. Then the consultancy doesn't yet have a website, partly because I'm yet to launch it. But if you want to reach out to me at Dale at clearsignalpartners.co.uk.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Dale.